Tony, I wanted to ask you something here because our show and Stugatz, this is your guy, my guy, and then a whole lot of things happen. Jorge Masvidal, we really enjoyed all of that ride in MMA, going into the circus, the silly fight tent, and Stugatz is going to weigh-ins and hanging out with The Rock. And Ben Askren, the fight that introduced him to us, even as a Miami guy who came from Kimbo Slice and the streets of Miami, we loved his story and the fight game. God, Stugatz, everything is made so much better when you have a story.
Yes.
And his story is and was a good one. He knocks out Askren with a knee, fastest knockout ever, and then ascends straight to the top of a fight game where Dana White will not share his money with anybody, will not share it with the fighters, becomes such a big star with his mouth and Conor McGregor and his story that he is headlining again and again, and people want to see him fight because he moves numbers, because he sells like McGregor does with his mouth. The fight, he is 3-5.
Correct.
He doesn't deserve any title fights. He's trying to talk his way into title fights. And Daniel Cormier, I thought, was very gentle about saying, come on, look, Tony, help me with this because I don't have the expertise you do here on MMA.
But he's a big draw, Dan. Like, regardless of the record, people tune in and watch him and pay for his matches.
No, I understood. He is a big draw, and in the age of Jake Paul, and you guys want to see Mayweather fight against Conor McGregor again, even though it's a shit fight and it's not real boxing. Yes. Now mouths sell, publicity sells, and Masvidal figured out that game because, like I said, in his last 8 fights, he's 3-5. Right. Stugatz, like he has not been a good fighter for a good long time. Never a story like it in the sport. Journeyman at the end gets to be a star. It's unprecedented, and he did it with a quick knockout. And so now, the thing I wanted to ask Tony, Daniel Cormier is such a pillar of representing that sport well, I think. I may be missing things. And I love Masvidal. I love that he'll say anything and knows it's a circus and it's wrestling. But Cormier just said, gently, I thought, Masvidal shouldn't get a title fight again. He shouldn't. He's 3-5. He doesn't deserve him. You wouldn't be giving it on merit. And then Masvidal goes after him with, guess you're still butthurt since I didn't do the interview you requested on your weak YouTube channel during my fight week. I know you needed my name to produce some sort of views since Ariel went solo and you became a has-been. Just make sure when Dana calls you and tells you to promote the biggest fight the current champ can make in the division, which is me, wear your best suit from DXL and make sure you do as you're told like a good boy. Maybe you'll get a treat from your master. Hashtag reason people watch on mute. That's pretty good.
Damn. Talking your language.
I like that. Yeah. Hashtag fake life coach. Hashtag broke advice.
Broke advice.
So, Tony, what do you have for me here?
So, Dan, here's the thing. Masvidal's 0-3 in his last 3. I know we see 3-5, but like realistically, he's 0-3 in his last 3. And those were both to Kamaru Usman and then Colby Covington, who's #1 contender in welterweight class.
They weren't close, though, right?
No.
He was never close in one of those fights.
One of them, the Kamaru Usman knockout was obviously knockout her around the world. The next one was on a short notice fight where he came in like 2 weeks out.
Right.
And then the one he just lost to Colby was a wrestling match, and that's not Georgia style. And then obviously we know what happened after.
Well, tell the people what happened after. It happened around here, right?
So Poppy Steak, one night, George gets wind that Colby, who's been talking shit, and there's been a lot of situations behind the scenes with certain people in his family, he basically said it was on site, and he rolled up on him and gave him a 2-piece and a soda, and then there was charges pressed and, all that stuff.
Jessica, what happened?
Well, what does that even mean?
A 2-piece and a soda? What do you mean?
Well, normally it's a 2-piece and a biscuit.
No, this one's a 2-piece and a soda. The biscuit,
oh, wow.
You have to have a soda because the biscuit, it's like,
That's
too
true.
much, it's too dry.
Yeah, too dry.
2 pieces, 1-2 punch combo, and then the sodas for the way home.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm unfamiliar. Is it a 2-piece with a biscuit? What is it? What is happening here right now?
Well, it's a 2 Americas thing probably, right? Because
it's always a 3 Americas thing.
Right.
Yeah.
We're going to upgrade it to 3 Americas?
It's 3 Americas, Dan.
But Billy doesn't seem to be in line with...
I haven't had soda in 4 weeks.
I'm so proud of him. Dan, we put that in the change
Unless we
jar.
have a soda sponsor, then I'm back, baby.
Yeah.
You put in the change jar that he needs to drink less soda?
Yeah, sometimes. and then he's taking
soda can kill you, man.
It had
Really.
absolutely nothing to do with your change jar. It had more to do with the kidney stones that it caused that had me stop drinking the soda.
Right.
Tony was taking credit for bringing about change in your life, not the hospitalization that
I was
made you
trying to
change
tell
your
him.
habits.
I was trying to tell him, hey, you know what? Maybe a little water, mix in a little, tea.
Billy, have you told people, because I'd been meaning to ask you about the pain, the physical pain of the kidney stones. It's supposed to be horrific.
Worse than having a baby, I'm told.
No.
Lots of people.
No.
Oh,
Take it back.
wow.
I'm giving you time right now to take it back.
I've never had a baby, so I don't know. I haven't, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Tony, continue.
That's what people
Yeah,
say,
I'm
but
gonna
obviously,
I'm going to save Billy here. Anyways, getting back to 2019, Leon Edwards and George Masvidal get into a fight backstage at the O2 at a card in London, right? So they've got this beef that's been brewing. Leon's been disrespected by the promotion. Nobody really cares about him. Nobody wants to give him a title shot, even though time after time after time he comes in and produces, right? He gets a shot against Usman in Salt Lake City, a place he's never even heard of. Kick heard around the world, knocks him out in the 5th round when the fight was going to be decidedly Usman's fight. He all of a sudden becomes, welterweight champion of the world, and we're trying to figure out what his next fight is. Is it a rubber match, his trilogy match?
Stunning
with
to
Usman?
see Usman lose, right?
It was honestly one of the biggest knockouts in the entire sport, right? Like, I don't think there's been a bigger knockout with the stakes being that high in, the 5th round when his coaches were like, hey, you need to wake up. You're losing 4 rounds to 1. Like,
and who
this
your
is
opponent
over.
is.
Yes.
And your opponent never loses
A guy
in
that
this
doesn't
spot.
get knocked out.
Not in this, not when all you got to do is not get knocked out.
Exactly.
Like, you can't, if I tell you going into a fight, all Usman's got to do is not get knocked out. Nobody's betting that he's getting knocked out.
Put it this way, Dan. The decision, Leon by decision on DraftKings was plus 1,000. The odds for Usman to get knocked out were plus 550, right? So, like, there was a weird thing happening at sports books where it's like, hey, we're going to, like, this is Kamaru Usman's fight unless he gets knocked out. And obviously he didn't see that kick. He fainted left. All of a sudden that kick comes over and he's in the shadow realm. Like, he's in a different place. So George now is angling, saying, okay, I know I've got this beef with Leon. Now this all of a sudden takes me to another level on the title fight, because there's Colby, where we're not going to see Colby get another fight for a title. There's Khamzat Chimaev, who's an absolute assassin, who they're setting up with Nate Diaz in 279 to basically take Nate Diaz out of the promotion.
Still with the Diaz brothers.
But Nate is such a huge draw, Dan, that Ariel, I was listening to Ariel and I was talking with some of his guys. They're like, if Nate beats Khamzat, which is like a massive upset,
come on,
will we have a Nate Diaz versus Leon Edwards welterweight title fight, which is incredible because, as you remember, Dan, I know you were watching, Nate Diaz gave Leon Edwards a huge shot with like a minute left to go in the fight that almost lost the fight.
Why are we talking about these fighters who are in their late 30s? The Diaz brothers still
being
with
ageist.
I mean, you asked the questions.
Tom Brady's 45.
I did ask the question.
A lot of shit's going on.
Fair enough. But the part I want to get into with you, Tony, isn't the mechanics of whether or not this is merited or not. It's, am I wrong about anything that I'm saying? I'm prone to side with Masvidal, his story. I like the cartoon characters who talk a lot, but this seems really disrespectful to Daniel Cormier, who is only respectful to people.
So that, knowing all that backstory that we just gave for the last couple minutes, there has been a sentiment, what I've read and heard and seen, there has been a sentiment with some fighters that DC has become corporate, has become Mr. UFC, where Dana gives him, and the company obviously works for ESPN.
Okay, all right. Okay, I hadn't seen that. Okay.
It feels like he's become a little bit more of the corporate suit rather than the fighter first kind of guy. So there has been some issues there, and George is just taking that to light and being like, hey, look, like, you used to be a fighter, you used to be a guy that would stand up for us, and now you're
But he didn't say that here. You're making that leap. These quotes don't say any of that. The backstory.
Well, how is Cormier being respectful? I mean, certainly. I mean,
he's
fine.
just saying his opinion.
He's stating facts. He's stating the truth. I understand that. But Masvidal's a big draw. Tell Cormier to get over it.
Okay, but okay, what are you doing?
Well, I mean, who is Cormier to chime in saying Masvidal doesn't deserve it? I mean, who is Cormier?
One of the greatest, heavyweights
Hall
of all
Famer,
time.
I think, isn't he?
Who's Cormier?
I know, but he's chiming in. So Masvidal is defending himself because that's what you do. Oh, you don't think I deserve these big fights? I deserve the big fights. I mean, and he does. Why? Because people tune in. I'll tune in.
All right, Stugotz, I really don't think.
Stop lying.
Time.
What? Stugotz.
Yeah. I mean, I was in his corner, Dan.
Okay, so you're going to try and
weigh in. I mean,
you're going to try and form the argument for Masvidal, bend over backward to make the argument when it's not about whether or not you get Stugotz. The way the title fights are supposed to happen are supposed to be on merit.
Right.
You don't get to just keep fighting for the title when you keep losing fights for the title. You don't like that's not how that happens.
I mean, Rocky got a title shot.
Okay, there it is. Stugotz's only fight knowledge. Every time we're talking about the fight game of any kind for 30 years. Stugotz's only contribution is Rocky. Let's get back to the phone habits.
I guess
worked harder.
So I guess the difference between the UFC and this is that Serena Williams, if she gets to the semifinals, will have deserved to be there. She will have won a match every other day for a week and a half.
Fair.
And will get to the semifinal. I think what we're talking about is you put Masvidal on a big card and give him a big, prize fight above other fighters and making more money than them, despite the fact that they're not better than them.
I think there's the last meritocracy that we have is UFC in a certain way where, like, if guys win their fight, right, like, they're going to go up. And there was a great disrespect to Leon Edwards because he used to fight and not get the love. And now that he has this love, now he's the meritocracy champion, right? But when you put up somebody like George in a pay-per-view sport, right, like, that's going to sell. A trilogy will sell. Nate Diaz will sell. But, like, it's in a weird spot where you have to make sure it's not Colby. It's not one of these guys that won't sell. So you're doing that both balance game of pay-per-view versus meritocracy.
But it's not a meritocracy then.
It is and it isn't at the same time.
Okay, so the merit is like how much money you make on pay-per-view buys.
For the company,
correct.
Yeah. But as far as fighting goes, like there's some merit there because best man wins.
So I have a question then, because I don't know. For the fighters on the undercard, it's better to have Masvidal doing it because they'll have more eyes on them. Like, they would prefer for one of these fights.
From a business standpoint, they're clearly telling you it's better to have Masvidal.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Like, for a business standpoint, if they're making more buys, then for the people who are proving themselves on the lower levels, it's better for them to have those fights because more people will see them.
Correct. Like, you want to be attached to a massive pay-per-view, right? Like, and that's what it is. Like,
Don't only a certain caliber of fighter get percentage of pay-per-views?
Champions usually only get pay-per-view points, or Nate Diaz, or Connor, somebody that's just too big of a star.
But even if
the people on the undercards don't.
But even if you're not and you're on the undercard, you're getting more eyes on you, which is how you would build your brand to then move up to that position, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's between being a kick-ass fighter, right, and then also being on cards that people want to see. Like 278 was a card that everybody's looking around like, okay, like this is kind of a weird card. There's not really any stars outside of Usman, but Usman cruises to victories all the time. And then this happens, right? And all of a sudden, this is such a big card because of what happened. People on the undercard get more play.
So you'd want to be on a Conor card.
I'd want to be on a Conor card. I'd want to be on a Masvidal card. I want to be on a Nate Diaz card. I want to be on an Adesanya card for sure. I want to be on the card that John Jones comes back. That's like the first card that you want to be on.
That would be the biggest card.
Yeah. Oh my God, that would be
his
huge.
first fight back.
His first fight back would break pay-per-view records.
How is the UFC doing as a star-making vehicle? I don't feel like I've heard a new name that like has really captured the attention.
Patty
in a
the
long
Batty
time.
was
Patty the Batty's
That's
awesome. Patty the Batty's awesome. Meatball Molly's awesome. Yeah. Here's the issue, right? There's been a wave of Dagestani Russian fighters that are hard to pronounce and hard to kind of get behind because they're not that promotable, right? The language barrier, the name barrier.
They're so scary, though. They're so scary.
Dan, like Hamzat Chimaev is a machine. Like, he is not a human being. He's just a Terminator. And he's going to take the welterweight division by storm. Okay. Oh, okay. Well, all right, Billy.
I think he's a human.
No, I think he's like part of the Witty mold made by machines and wires and whatnot.
No, he bleeds. I'm with Billy. Yeah.
But what he's saying, man, the cultural stuff happening in that sport is great. When the fighting game is being dominated by Africans, or in what it is that Tony is talking about, which is these Russian Siberian robots that you might not want to fight, like watch fight, but are all elbows and knees and granite and will. And it's like, oh my God, how does anyone beat that crawling, that spider demon? You know what I mean? Like, isn't that what's happening culturally there, Tone?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, Nigerian fighters are having, like, obviously Ngannou, Adesanya, Kamaru Usman, like there's different waves in the UFC. And right now we're just seeing like a huge Russian Dagestani wave of, obviously Khabib's not fighting anymore. Now he's retired and he's bringing all these guys under him up. And that's where you're seeing all these like Russian wrestlers coming out of nowhere. They're 17-0. It's like, how? Because they're just fighting bears in Siberia.
Like Drago.
Well, I need to get back to this because my frustration is Woody's frustration,
Rocky
which is
IV.
I want to examine for a moment just the lazy
Siberia.
sloppiness and not knowing anything about what he's talking about and analyzing the mixed martial arts. He knows so
MMA.
little that he says of Daniel Cormier. Who the hell is he? What has he ever done? He knows nothing. His only knowledge is Drago, Mr. T jokes. It's Rocky. It's all I've got for 30 years every time you want to talk about this. And I know it's only been 20 years, but it feels like fucking 30 when this is what you're getting. When you care about the fight game and you want to talk about it and you find it interesting culturally.
Oh, is this where you're going to become Larry Merchant again?
I cannot do a show talking about this with you when after 20 goddamn years, all you've got is Rocky. Like, you've supported me not at all on this subject. I've been waiting for 20 years for you to give me something other than Rocky when we're talking about this. And so your words mean so little that when I'm talking to you about Cormier, your response is, who the hell is he? And the answer is, one of the most decorated fighters in the history of fucking fighting.
Overrated.